On today's episode of the New Republic's Daily Blast with Greg Sargent, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey said this about the toll of Donald Trump's operations and invasions in Minneapolis.
The economic impact has, of course, been devastating. The impact on people's lives, on, the mental health of our kids. Yeah, obviously, big impact. But I don't like to use the kind of wounded victim narrative here, because the people here are tough as hell. I mean, we get knocked down 7 times and we get back up 8.
President Obama discussed the resilience of the people of Minneapolis in a podcast interview with Brian Tyler Cohen.
A friend of mine, Michelle Norris, is from Minnesota, and she was up there, and she was going around talking to neighbors and people she had known for a long time as they were mobilizing protests and activities around ICE. And she showed me a clip of this street band that was performing every night after all these activities had been taking place and protests, et cetera. And they were just out there and they were playing music, and I'm trying to figure out how they were playing, horns and drums, et cetera, in like 0-degree weather, because I would not have been able to put my lips on on a trumpet. And people were celebrating what they had accomplished. And it was an embodiment of the values that make us care about other people. And that, I think, is a spirit that when Democrats tap into that spirit, then we win.
Here is some of the video that Michelle Norris showed to President Obama.
All day, every day, Minneapolis and Twin Cities, we love y'all. To me, she said, how can you smile when your world is tumbling down? And I said, it's my secret. When I want to cry, I take a look around and I see that we did more.
And joining us now is MS Now senior contributing editor Michelle Norris. Michelle, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And as soon as I heard President Obama say that about that video, I said, when can we get Michelle on the show? Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Tell us about that. Tell us about, first of all, seeing that, being out there where this kind of spirit was so alive.
Well, I was surprised to hear that he mentioned that. I didn't know that was coming. And I was pleased, not because he talked about, the friendship or anything, but he talked about the spirit of the people of Minnesota. And I think it's important for people to see that and to see how they've responded to that and the joy in resistance. That video is of a group, they call themselves Brass Solidarity. They are sort of a loosely formed group of musicians that formed in the wake of the George Floyd protest. And as Metro Surge descended on the state of Minnesota, they started performing at first once a week, but after Renee Good was killed, then they started to perform more often. And then after Alex Preddy was killed, they started to perform almost daily as a way to keep people, keep their spirits up, as a way to create community where people can come together in these memorials, as a way to help people fight exhaustion. Because this has been going on for weeks, where people are walking kids to school or people are monitoring their communities. And it's clear that Minnesotans are not going to back down. They've showed this. You heard Mayor Frey say, they're tough, they're fierce. Minnesota Nice has been replaced by Minnesota Fierce, I guess you could say. But exhaustion is real. And one of the ways that they counteract that is by figuring out how to inject the resistance movement with joy. And what you saw there were a group of people, we should just note where they are. They're standing on a lake, on a frozen lake. That's a couple hundred people standing on a frozen lake, singing, "Hold On, We're Going to Make It." And what they were doing that night is creating a sign on the lake using luminaries and candles that said, ice out, and that lake is on the pathway. The planes fly over that lake on the way to the international airport. So they were also sending up a signal to the planes coming in and out of the city. And the video you see there is the Brass Solidarity earlier this week on Monday, I think largely because of the mention from President Obama. Their numbers have been growing, and what you're seeing there is there were 78 people that were out that day at George Floyd Square, which is not far from where Renee Good was killed. And they had orchestra members, they had kids show up from high school bands, they had someone show up with a kazoo, they had someone with a guitar who brought a folding chair because he wasn't able to stand, but he wanted to play his guitar and be a part of it. And when you hear Donald Trump talk about paid agitators and the way that they talk about people who are engaged in constitutionally protected activity, that image does not comport with that description. You know, what you're seeing there are people who are standing up for their beliefs and trying to hold the line and make sure that America is protected in some way, and protecting individuals, but also the notion of the rule of law and in a thriving and functioning democracy.
Michele Norris, thank you very much for bringing it to President Obama's attention so that he could tell them that he's watching. And that looks like the Obama concert that's out there now, that larger number. And thank you very, very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Lawrence. My best to you.
Thank you.